We are Group 6, and we're going to be talking about nonverbal communication in regards to Cornerstone's short-term missions. And Noah's going to talk about the importance of it.
Thanks, Nick. All right, so this project had to do with the importance of nonverbal communication in short-term missions, especially with Cornerstone's short-term missions trips. And here I have 4 countries listed: Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, and Zambia. These are all countries that students take trips on, whether it's during the school year, during Christmas break, or even during a whole summer. And I've talked to a lot of students that have been on these trips, and they agree that there are a lot of barriers with the different cultures, language barriers, just stuff that gets in the way of effective communication and doing the missions that they're there for. So we're going to emphasize the importance of nonverbal communication. Every culture communicates nonverbally in a different way because of the language barriers. So say Cornerstone student who knows no Spanish goes to Guatemala. They're going to have trouble talking to people there. They may know a few words like el baño and por favor, but they're not going to be able to really get their message across without using nonverbal communication. This could be facial expressions, hand gestures, things of the sort. But we're going to emphasize a few that we learned about in our studies that we read up on some scholarly articles. Cultural cues are huge in nonverbal communication, especially in different countries. In the Middle East, the most powerful person is the last person to enter the room. We saw that in the video we watched in class. So you may want to think about holding the door open for someone, just being aware of who's the most important person in the room. You don't want to say something disrespectful and have them upset with you because you didn't know better. Now, in the Dominican culture, they scrunch their nose when confused about something. One of the guys I live with, John, he was in the Dominican this summer for a few weeks, and he's actually going back for the entire summer, this upcoming summer. And he said that there were a lot of things like this that he had to learn quickly in order to communicate effectively with the locals. And then from one of our studies in Nigeria, we learned that eye contact is not expected in conversation. Now, in our American culture, this may be considered rude because if someone's not looking at you, you would tend to think that they're not listening to you or don't care about what you have to say. So those are just 3 examples of different cultural cues that are important with nonverbal communication. Now, Kyle's going to talk about a biblical worldview and application. Actually, we're going to talk about the scientific facts first of nonverbal communication. We learned that 7% of understanding is from uttered word and communication. That leaves 93% to things like nonverbal communication, location, that kind of thing. Only 38% is from vocal elements, which plays right into the first statistic, and as much as 55% of a message is sent through its nonverbal elements. Now we'll have Kyle.
All right. Approaching this from a biblical worldview, our primary reason for existence is to love God and serve Him, and to disciple others. And if we're to apply this to a biblical situation, if a missionary is speaking to a group of people in a foreign country, they can use the knowledge of social cues and other forms of nonverbal communication to get a better read on their audience. They can better tell which points they're hitting home with and which are falling short. Then one of our studies we looked at was the Croatian study, and they took 10 public relation professionals, 6 of which were females, 4 were males, and they went through and interviewed each participant and asked them questions regarding the importance of nonverbal cues and communication and the overall scheme of communication and how that applied. The independent variables were the questions and the wording the interviewers used. Dependent variables being the interpretation by the respondents and their answers. The results across the board, the 10 professionals conveyed that how they found being a well-skilled in nonverbal communication was important to being an effective communicator. However, only 2 of the 10 had received any formal training on the matter. This applies to our project, really. and that more formal training is needed in the business field along with different missions fields. Um, to replicate this data or this experience or study, it'd be very possible. You just have to repeat similar types of questions with another group of public relations professionals. Uh, and you can see our anecdotal evidence and peer-reviewed cited. And Seth's going to talk about our next study.
So our next study was a study done through Nigerian business people, whether it was with other Nigerians or with non-Nigerian business people and their experiences. The survey sample size was 250, given to 150 in the U.S. and 100 from Nigeria. Of that 250, 106 responded, and that's who makes up our control group. The assigning of the subjects included those who responded, and the independent variables were based on each question asked and the different wording in each. As far as dependent variable goes, that would be the control group and the group that we're going to analyze in this study. So then if we go to our checklist and how we would determine whether it is a scientific study or reputable to be a scientific study, some of the things we look at are information allowing for replication. This study is replicable, and it can be done and has been done. Next, we look at anecdotal evidence. Yes, this survey does have anecdotal evidence. The survey was self-administered, and the results were gathered through the respondents' feedback of the 106 participants. Whether this article and study was peer-reviewed, yes, it was verified by researchers familiar with Nigerian communication and specifically nonverbals. This study was also tested against 100 or more observations of the negotiations. Next, we look at our scientific evidence, and these statistics may look very detailed and can be a little overwhelming, but the parameters that they use were based on a multiple choice system, A through E, 0% being never, 1 to 24% being seldom, 25 to 49 being occasionally, 50 to 74% frequently, and then 75% to 100 would be the respondent giving an almost always response. So it goes through and looks at some of the different things, oculesics, proxemics, paralanguage. Also, as you can see here, silence, whether people use a respective manner in doing that. The kinesics, that could be your head nods, your gestures, slight touch, extensive touch. And then it also looked at whether people had bad experiences controlling nonverbal messages. So based on those two slides, we came up with some results from this study. Some of the results included about half thought that there was a balance between verbal and nonverbal. One thing we noticed was most Nigerians do not use eye contact with other Nigerians. A high percentage of Nigerians adjust the space between them when dealing with non-Nigerians, while another large portion do not adjust space when dealing just with people they're familiar with or people from their culture. People also use respective silence, and that was used about half the time to give people kind of this respective manner, not so much to offend them. And then we also found that word choice is very important, and so is dressing up for the business deals. Just the way that you present yourself and the way that you go about your speech is very important. So next we're going to have someone talk about our recommendation, and that will be Noah.
All right, so our recommendation, based on our findings and research, we believe that it's very important for individuals in Cornerstone's short-term missions trips to be knowledgeable regarding nonverbal communication, especially in the culture that they're going to. It's important enough to know the nonverbal communication markers in our own culture, let alone to a culture we don't know that much about. I think when you look at the studies that we analyze, especially the statistics from the Nigerian study, those are some incredible numbers that just proved the depth and the difference between different cultures. The fact that eye contact isn't important there in Nigeria is something that you wouldn't know just making a quick trip there to do your week-long missions trip. But imagine if you're having a conversation with someone and you do something disrespectful to them in communication, or just something that disrespects them as a person. You're going to have a much tougher time trying to get across your mission of your message of Jesus Christ than if you had understood their culture coming in. So we think that it's very important for these students to study nonverbal communication, and it's very important to be lifelong learners of nonverbal communication as well. This kind of thing doesn't stop when you get out of college. This continues to business deals that you would do in the marketing firm you work at after school, or maybe you go to work for a construction company and there's people from a different country working on that team with you that use nonverbal communication a lot. So we found that it's very important, and you should be a lifelong learner of it. And here are references for the 2 studies. Thank you for listening. We've been Group 6.